She stood alone in the courtroom, the tension palpable. The judge's voice boomed, announcing the decision that could shatter her world. Nora had fought tooth and nail for her inheritance, but now, with everything at stake, it seemed she might lose it all. As whispers filled the room and eyes bore into her, she felt the weight of her past and future colliding. What happened next would defy all expectations. Nora stood alone in the courtroom, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them together, her eyes fixed on the judge. The tension was almost unbearable, a heavy silence hanging over the room like a thick fog. She had come so far, fought so hard, but now everything hung in the balance. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing the gravity of the moment. The weight of what was at stake pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe. She felt the eyes of everyone in the room on her, waiting, watching. The judge's voice broke the silence, deep and resonant, delivering the decision that could change everything. It was a moment she had dreaded, and yet, here it was unfolding in front of her. She braced herself, every muscle in her body tensing in anticipation of the words that would either destroy her dreams or vindicate her fight. She had never felt so small, so vulnerable. The room seemed to close in around her, the walls pushing in, the air thickening. Nora's mind raced back to all the moments that had led her here. Every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every ounce of energy she had poured into this battle. She had been determined to fight for what was rightfully hers, despite the odds stacked against her. She had faced ridicule, doubt, and outright hostility, but she had never backed down. Now, with everything on the line, she wondered if it had all been in vain. Was she about to lose everything she had fought for? The whispers began to spread across the room like wildfire. Hushed voices filled with speculation and judgment. She could feel their eyes boring into her, their silent accusations, their quiet disdain. She felt exposed, vulnerable, every mistake she had ever made flashing before her eyes. The shame of her past, the failures that had led her to this point, weighed heavily on her shoulders. She could feel the room's collective gaze on her, dissecting her every move, every breath. But then, amidst the chaos of her thoughts, a spark of defiance ignited within her. She had not come this far to be defeated. She lifted her chin slightly, squaring her shoulders as she steadied herself. She remembered the faces of those who had helped her, who believed in her when no one else did. The judge's words were still ringing in her ears, but she refused to let them break her. She had one last move to play, one final card to turn the tide in her favor. Nora walks the crowded streets, her clothes worn and her hair unkempt. The city moves around her, filled with people who don't notice her existence. Each step feels heavy, a reminder of the burden she carries. She clutches a small, frayed bag, her only possession. Her deep green eyes scan the surroundings, searching for a sign of hope in a world that seems to have forgotten her. She pauses at a busy intersection, the sounds of honking cars and distant sirens filling the air. She watches people rush past her, their faces blurred by the speed of their lives. She feels invisible, a ghost passing through their world. Her heart aches with a loneliness that has become her constant companion. The city is alive, but for Nora, it feels like a prison. She remembers the nights spent on park benches, curled up to protect herself from the cold. The streetlights flicker above, casting long shadows that stretch across the pavement. She would watch the shadows dance, her mind drifting to a time when life was simpler, when she had a home, a family, a future. Now, every night is a battle for survival, a test of endurance. In her darkest moments, Nora found solace in small acts of kindness. A stranger offering a meal, a warm smile from a passerby. These brief moments of humanity kept her going, gave her a reason to believe that there was still good in the world. She would hold on to these memories, like tiny sparks of light in an otherwise dark existence. But even as she found strength in these moments, she knew they were fleeting. The reality of her situation was harsh and unforgiving. She had lost so much, and the weight of her losses was heavy on her shoulders. Yet, there was a determination in her eyes, a resolve to keep moving forward, to find a way out of the darkness. She wasn't ready to give up, not yet. Nora sits on a bench, her posture slouched and her gaze distant. Her dark brown hair falls in loose waves around her face, and her deep green eyes are filled with weariness. She is lost in thought, reflecting on her life's hardships and the daily struggle she's faced. Her clothes are simple and slightly worn, a testament to the tough life she's lived on the streets. Suddenly, a man approaches, his expression serious yet hesitant. He is dressed in a suit, holding a manila envelope with Nora's name on it. He hands her the envelope without a word. Nora looks at him with a mixture of confusion and curiosity, not knowing what to expect. She carefully opens the envelope, her hands trembling slightly. Inside, she finds an official-looking letter. Her deep green eyes scan the words, and her face slowly transforms from disbelief to shock. The letter informs her that she has inherited a substantial fortune from a distant relative she never knew existed. Nora's heart races as she reads further, the enormity of the news sinking in. She tries to comprehend the sudden change in her circumstances. Her expression shifts from shock to a hesitant smile, a glimmer of hope appearing in her eyes for the first time in years. She realizes that this could be the break she has been waiting for, a chance to turn her life around. Despite the initial disbelief, Nora begins to feel a wave of emotions: relief, joy, and a hint of fear about the unknown future. Her hands clutch the letter tightly, her mind racing with possibilities. For the first time, she feels like her life is about to take a different path, one that could lead to a brighter future. She looks up, a determined look settling on her face, ready to embrace this unexpected twist of fate. Nora stands in her new luxury apartment, feeling a mix of awe and discomfort. The space is vast and filled with elegant furniture, each piece carefully chosen to exude wealth. She wears a modest dress, contrasting sharply with the opulent surroundings. Her posture is tense, her arms slightly crossed, as she surveys the unfamiliar environment, trying to absorb the magnitude of her new life. She walks hesitantly across the marble floors, her footsteps echoing softly in the expansive living room. Her dark brown hair cascades over her shoulders, and her deep green eyes scan the room with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. The modern art on the walls and the sleek, high-end appliances in the kitchen feel like a world apart from what she's known. As she moves closer to the floor-to-ceiling windows, she catches a glimpse of the breathtaking cityscape. The view is stunning, stretching out for miles, but it only adds to her sense of isolation. She places a hand on the cool glass, her expression thoughtful and slightly overwhelmed, wondering if she truly belongs in this new world of luxury. She takes a deep breath and turns away from the window, her gaze falling on a large, ornate mirror hanging on the wall. For a moment, she studies her reflection, seeing a woman who looks both out of place and strangely determined. The lines of worry are still etched on her face, but there's a new spark of resolve in her eyes. Despite the initial discomfort, Nora knows she must find a way to adapt. She begins to explore the apartment more confidently, touching the fine fabrics of the curtains and the smooth surfaces of the designer furniture. Her steps grow firmer, her back straighter, as she starts to embrace this unexpected opportunity to redefine her life. Nora sits in a large conference room, surrounded by a group of well-dressed business professionals. Their eyes are on her, filled with skepticism and doubt. Her posture is slightly hunched, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, as if trying to shield herself from their scrutiny. Her deep green eyes dart around the room, sensing the judgment in their gazes. She listens attentively as a man with slicked-back silver hair and piercing blue eyes speaks. His tone is sharp, and his words are laced with subtle condescension. Nora tries to maintain her composure, but the lines of tension are visible on her face. She knows she must prove herself, not just to them, but to herself as well. As the meeting progresses, Nora feels a wave of self-doubt wash over her. She recalls moments from her past when she struggled to make ends meet, and the weight of those memories presses down on her. She shifts uncomfortably in her seat, trying to push those thoughts aside, but they linger, casting a shadow over her newfound confidence. The room feels colder, and she senses the subtle whispers of those around her, questioning her presence and her right to be there. Nora takes a deep breath, straightening her back slightly, determined to face this challenge head-on. Her gaze meets that of a younger woman with curly black hair and warm brown eyes, who seems to be watching her closely, perhaps with a hint of understanding or even empathy. Despite the lingering doubts and the palpable tension in the room, Nora begins to speak. Her voice is steady, though her hands still tremble slightly. She presents her ideas, her words carefully chosen, each one a step toward proving her worth. She knows this is just the beginning of a series of challenges she will face, but she is resolved to not let this first hurdle defeat her. Nora sits alone in a vast, elegant living room, her eyes distant as she gazes out a large window. The light filtering in casts long shadows on the polished floors, emphasizing the emptiness around her. Her posture is tense, and her hands grip the armrests of her chair. She feels the weight of countless eyes upon her, the relentless scrutiny from the media and public questioning her every move. As days pass, the pressure mounts. Headlines in bold letters question her ability to handle her newfound wealth. Talk shows and social media debates speculate on her competence, some even suggesting she isn't fit to manage such a fortune. Nora tries to ignore the noise, but each word feels like a new weight added to her shoulders. She often finds herself in this room, seeking solace, yet feeling more isolated with every passing day. In moments of solitude, she reflects on her past struggles and the resilience she has always shown. She knows she cannot crumble under this pressure, yet the doubt creeps in, amplified by the voices outside. Still, Nora decides she must rise above the criticism, using their doubts as fuel for her determination. She resolves to prove everyone wrong, to show the world she is more than capable of managing not just her fortune, but her destiny. Nora sits at a polished desk, her face tense as she reviews a contract laid out before her. The room is quiet, yet her mind is a whirlwind of thoughts. She knows this investment is risky, but she believes in the potential of the venture. Her hand hovers over the pen, hesitation evident in her eyes. Finally, with a deep breath, she signs the document, sealing her decision with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Days turn into weeks, and the initial optimism begins to wane. Reports come in suggesting the investment is faltering. The once promising numbers are now dwindling, and the tension in Nora's body grows each day. She tries to stay composed, but the financial loss looms larger. The pressure mounts as she realizes that this gamble may cost her more than she anticipated. The final blow comes when she receives a call from her financial advisor, confirming the worst. The investment has failed, and the loss is significant. Nora sits in the same chair where she once confidently signed the contract, but now her shoulders are slumped, and her face shows a blend of shock and disappointment. She knows she must face the consequences of her choice, even as the weight of this failure presses down on her. Nora stands in a spacious law office, her posture rigid and her expression focused. Across from her is Brandon, a man in his early 50s with slicked-back silver hair and piercing blue eyes, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit. His face is set in a confident, almost smug expression as he holds a legal document in his hand. He makes his case calmly but firmly, challenging the legitimacy of Nora's inheritance. Nora's eyes flash with a mix of disbelief and determination. She had anticipated obstacles, but not this. The tension in the room is palpable, with the air heavy with unspoken words and growing animosity. As the confrontation intensifies, Brandon's demeanor becomes more assertive. He leans forward slightly, his body language exuding control and dominance. Nora, however, does not back down. She stands her ground, her face reflecting both her resolve and the weight of the unexpected challenge. The lawyers and assistants around them exchange uneasy glances, sensing the gravity of the situation. It is clear that Brandon is not just another adversary. He is a formidable force with the resources and cunning to pose a serious threat to Nora's position. The meeting concludes with a chilling statement from Brandon, leaving Nora momentarily stunned. As he exits the room, a slight, satisfied smile crosses his lips, hinting at his confidence in the battle he has just begun. Nora remains behind, her mind racing as she contemplates her next move. The stakes have been raised, and she knows that this is just the beginning of a legal battle that could decide her future. She takes a deep breath, ready to face whatever comes next, even as the reality of Brandon's challenge settles in. Nora sits alone in her bedroom, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her face, framed by loose waves of dark brown hair, is a canvas of conflicting emotions. Her deep green eyes, usually so filled with determination, now reveal a flicker of doubt. She reaches up, touching her face gently, as if trying to find strength in her own reflection. The recent events, the legal battle with Brandon, have shaken her confidence to the core. She wonders if she truly has the resilience to withstand this new storm, or if she is just fooling herself. Her shoulders slump slightly, weighed down by the burden of her thoughts. Nora's thoughts swirl with questions and uncertainties. She begins to pace the room, her movements slow and deliberate. She runs her hands through her hair, a gesture that shows both frustration and contemplation. Memories of her past struggles resurface, and she wonders if all her efforts have been in vain. The room feels smaller, almost suffocating, as if her fears are closing in on her. She stops again in front of the mirror, this time leaning in closer, searching her eyes for a spark of the determination she once knew so well. Her reflection seems almost like a stranger's, a version of herself she is not familiar with. Finally, she sinks onto the edge of her bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her face softens, showing a moment of vulnerability that she rarely allows herself to feel. She takes a deep breath, her eyes closing momentarily as she tries to steady her racing thoughts. When she opens them again, there is a hint of resolve. She knows she must face her fears head-on, but the path ahead remains uncertain and daunting. Despite the rising doubt within her, she understands that giving up is not an option. She needs to find a way to rebuild her confidence, to confront the challenges that lie ahead. Nora finds herself standing on a busy street corner, lost in thought. Her mind is still reeling from the latest encounter with Brandon, her determination wavering. Suddenly, a familiar voice cuts through the noise around her. She turns and sees Jackson, a face from her past, now walking towards her with a confident stride. He looks different from the last time they met, his rugged appearance softened by a new sense of purpose. He smiles warmly, his hazel eyes reflecting a hint of empathy. Without hesitation, he offers his help, knowing well the battle she is facing. Nora feels a surge of mixed emotions, relief, surprise, and a cautious hope. Jackson, once a prominent banker, now carries himself with a more relaxed demeanor. He explains how he left his old life behind, seeking redemption after his own set of failures. He tells Nora that he understands what it feels like to be cornered and offers his assistance, not out of pity, but from a genuine desire to help. Nora listens, her skepticism slowly giving way to curiosity. She remembers the times when Jackson was in a similar position, struggling with his own demons. His journey from a man of power to one of understanding and humility strikes a chord with her. She begins to consider his offer, seeing him as a potential ally in this complicated fight. As they continue talking, the bustling city around them seems to fade away. Jackson's calm and steady voice reassures her that they can devise a plan together, leveraging his knowledge and her determination. For the first time in days, Nora feels a glimmer of hope. Jackson's unexpected return and his willingness to stand by her side present a new opportunity. She decides to trust him, realizing that perhaps this is the break she's been waiting for, a chance to turn the tide against Brandon's relentless pursuit. Nora and Jackson sit across from each other in a small, cozy cafe, their faces illuminated by the warm, golden light streaming through the window. They are leaning forward, speaking in hushed tones, the weight of their conversation palpable. Jackson, with a thoughtful expression, lays out the first part of their plan. He suggests using his contacts in the finance world to discreetly move some of Nora's assets, keeping them out of Brandon's reach. Nora listens carefully, nodding as she starts to see the potential in his ideas. She feels a renewed sense of hope, her initial skepticism giving way to cautious optimism. As they continue brainstorming, their ideas begin to flow more freely. Nora, now more animated, proposes another angle. They could use public opinion to their advantage, subtly discrediting Brandon's intentions without directly accusing him. Jackson smiles, admiring Nora's quick thinking and strategic mind. They scribble down notes on a napkin, their collaboration bringing a new dynamic to the table. For the first time in weeks, Nora feels like she is not fighting this battle alone. Jackson's presence and support provide her with the strength she needs to keep pushing forward. The cafe buzzes with activity around them, but Nora and Jackson are engrossed in their discussion, oblivious to the world outside their table. Their plan becomes more concrete with each passing moment, a mixture of legal maneuvers and public relations tactics. They know it won't be easy, and there are risks involved, but both feel a sense of purpose driving them forward. With a final nod, they agree on the next steps. As they leave the cafe, there's a noticeable shift in Nora's demeanor. She walks with her head held higher, her stride more confident, ready to face the next challenge. Nora begins to notice subtle changes in her surroundings, little things that don't quite add up. A document she was certain she had locked away now sits out on her desk. A trusted assistant seems overly curious about her plans. She starts to feel the weight of suspicion growing on her shoulders. The feeling gnaws at her, a sinking sensation in her stomach that she can't shake. She decides to stay vigilant, keeping her eyes and ears open for any sign of betrayal. Her trust in those around her begins to waver, making her feel increasingly isolated. One evening, as Nora is reviewing her notes, she receives an anonymous tip. The message is brief and vague, but hints at something much darker, a betrayal from within. She looks around, feeling a chill run down her spine. Could it be true? Could someone so close be working against her? The idea seems unthinkable, yet she knows she cannot dismiss it. She decides to dig deeper, uncovering the truth herself. As she starts her quiet investigation, she notices the behaviors of those around her shifting subtly. Conversations grow quieter when she enters a room, and there are stolen glances exchanged that she hadn't noticed before. Then, the betrayal reveals itself in a shocking turn. A hand, shrouded in darkness, passes a set of documents. Her documents to Brandon Miller. Nora's heart sinks as she watches from a distance, recognizing the hand immediately. It belongs to someone she had once considered a loyal confidant. The documents are incriminating, and she knows that Brandon now holds a dangerous advantage. This unexpected twist throws her plans into disarray, and she is forced to reevaluate everything. Who else might be plotting against her? She knows she must act fast to protect what little she has left. Nora stands at the courthouse steps, her eyes scanning the crowd. She feels the weight of her defeat pressing down on her shoulders. Each step she takes heavier than the last. The judgment was swift, a harsh blow she hadn't anticipated. Her confidence, once a steady flame, now flickers weakly in the face of the cold reality. The ruling has cost her dearly, both financially and emotionally. She struggles to maintain her composure, her hands clenched tightly around her briefcase, as she pushes through the sea of faces that offer no solace, only judgment. The whispers around her grow louder, and she catches fragments of conversations, people doubting her capabilities, questioning her decisions. She feels a burning shame creeping up her neck, threatening to overwhelm her. Each word stings like a fresh wound. She knew this battle would be tough, but the loss hits harder than she imagined. The documents, the arguments, everything she had put forward crumbled under the weight of the opposing counsel's well-crafted narrative. She looks back at the courthouse, her heart sinking further as she realizes how quickly her efforts have been dismissed. As she reaches the bottom of the steps, her strength falters. She feels small, almost insignificant against the backdrop of towering buildings and the imposing structure of the courthouse. The low angle of the scene makes her appear overwhelmed and powerless, a stark contrast to the determined figure who once walked confidently into the courtroom. She pauses, gathering her breath, her mind racing with what went wrong and how she could have prevented this outcome. Yet, beneath the despair, a small flicker of resolve begins to stir, urging her not to give up just yet. Nora sits alone in her luxurious apartment, her surroundings offering little comfort. The space, once a symbol of her success, now feels hollow and suffocating. She is surrounded by piles of papers, legal documents, bills, and letters, each one a reminder of her mounting problems. Her hands tremble slightly as she picks up yet another bill, her eyes scanning the numbers that seem to blur together. The high-angle view captures her in this moment of vulnerability, emphasizing how small and powerless she feels despite the grandeur of her home. As the day turns into night, the weight of her situation becomes more unbearable. The shadows in the room grow longer, mirroring the dark thoughts that fill her mind. Nora's face is etched with lines of worry and fatigue, her once vibrant eyes now dulled by despair. She looks around the room, her gaze settling on a family photo on the table. A flicker of pain crosses her face, a reminder of the life she once had, the people she had lost. The isolation is palpable. Each breath feels heavier than the last. Desperation takes hold as she begins to pace around the apartment. Her movements are frantic, driven by a mix of anxiety and hopelessness. She clutches a stack of papers to her chest, her mind racing for a solution that seems ever more elusive. Her steps slow as she reaches the window, looking out into the city that seems so distant and indifferent to her plight. The city lights blur in her vision, and for a moment, she considers giving up. But deep down, a stubborn resolve lingers, urging her to keep fighting, no matter how bleak things appear. Nora sits in her living room, her eyes scanning an old letter she found hidden among her late husband's papers. The words blur momentarily as she reads them again, her heart racing. This letter, dated decades ago, reveals a truth she never imagined. It speaks of a secret agreement between her husband and a wealthy but reclusive benefactor. The inheritance she thought was her husband's hard-earned fortune was, in fact, a well-kept secret. The shock of this discovery leaves her breathless, and her hand instinctively moves to cover her mouth in disbelief. As the initial shock settles, she feels a wave of anger and betrayal wash over her. She had always believed her husband had built their fortune through hard work and perseverance. To learn now that it was all a facade, a carefully constructed lie, breaks her trust. She paces the room, clutching the letter, her mind racing with questions. Why was this kept from her? Who else knew about it? And most importantly, what does this revelation mean for her future? The feeling of being deceived by the person she trusted most starts to turn into a deep sense of resolve. Nora realizes she cannot trust anyone with this newfound knowledge. She decides to dig deeper, to find out who this benefactor was and why they had chosen to give such a large sum of money to her husband. Determination fills her eyes as she sits down at her computer, starting her search for the truth. Every click and every piece of information she uncovers brings her closer to understanding the secret that had been hidden from her for so long. She knows this could change everything, but she is ready to face whatever comes next, armed with this newfound truth. Nora, feeling a surge of determination, decides to use the new information she uncovered about her husband's secret benefactor to her advantage. She knows this might be her last chance to regain her position and salvage her future. She quickly arranges a meeting with Grace, her trusted lawyer, to discuss a plan. As they sit across from each other in a quiet, secluded corner of a local cafe, Nora lays out everything she has discovered. She speaks with a newfound intensity, her voice steady yet filled with urgency. Grace listens intently, her expression serious as she absorbs the gravity of the situation. As Nora finishes explaining, Grace leans in closer, her eyes narrowing with focus. She understands the potential power of this information, but also the risks involved. She proposes a bold strategy, one that involves confronting those who may have hidden this truth from Nora for so long. They discuss every detail, weighing the pros and cons. The stakes are high, and both women know that failure could mean the end of Nora's remaining influence and security. Grace suggests a direct approach, targeting the key figures who might be involved in this secret deal. Nora nods, her resolve hardening as she realizes this may be her only shot. With the plan set, Nora feels a mix of fear and hope. She knows this will not be easy, and the path ahead is fraught with challenges. But she also feels a spark of hope, a glimmer of possibility that she hasn't felt in a long time. As they leave the cafe, Grace places a reassuring hand on Nora's shoulder, reminding her that she's not alone in this fight. Together, they walk out, ready to take on the challenge ahead, with a shared sense of purpose and a burning desire to uncover the truth and reclaim what rightfully belongs to her. As the days pass, Grace and Jackson begin to harbor doubts about Nora's ability to turn the situation around. The plans they had carefully laid out seem to be unraveling, and the once clear path forward now feels muddied with uncertainty. In a tense meeting at Grace's office, both she and Jackson express their concerns. Grace's voice is calm yet firm, as she articulates her fears that they may be fighting a losing battle. Jackson, standing by the window with his arms crossed, nods in agreement. Nora listens in silence, her eyes reflecting a mixture of disbelief and hurt. The air is thick with tension as Nora finally responds, her voice shaky but defiant. She insists that they cannot give up now, not when they are so close to uncovering the truth. But her words are met with skepticism. Jackson steps forward, his expression one of frustration. He questions whether Nora's emotional attachment to the case has clouded her judgment, making her blind to the realities they face. Grace, trying to mediate, suggests taking a step back to reassess their options. However, her suggestion feels more like a dismissal than a strategy. Nora feels the weight of their doubt pressing down on her. Feeling isolated and betrayed, Nora stands alone in the middle of the room, watching as Jackson and Grace exchange glances. She realizes that she can no longer count on their support. The room, once a place of collaboration and hope, now feels cold and distant. With a heavy heart, Nora gathers her things, her movements slow and deliberate. She takes a deep breath, trying to steady herself as she prepares to face the next battle alone. She walks out, her resolve hardening with each step. Despite the growing sense of isolation, a flicker of determination remains in her eyes, hinting at a strength yet to be fully revealed. Nora sits alone in a dimly lit corner of her once bustling home. The walls seem to close in on her as she reflects on every choice she has made up until this moment. Her mind races through memories. Decisions that once seemed so clear now blur with doubt and regret. The weight of her loneliness presses heavily on her shoulders, each breath a reminder of her growing isolation. Tears well up in her deep green eyes, threatening to spill over. She tries to hold them back, but the emotions are too overwhelming. Her hands tremble as she clasps them tightly together, seeking comfort in the only way she knows how. She gazes out of the window, the city lights blurred by her tears. Her thoughts drift to a simpler time when she believed in the justice of her cause, when her friends stood by her side without question. Now, that faith feels like a distant memory. Her vision is drawn downward as a single tear escapes, trailing down her cheek before falling to the cold, hard floor. It splashes silently, a small but profound symbol of her deep-seated despair. The sound of the tear hitting the ground seems to echo in the stillness of the room, each drop a reminder of her solitude. Nora's reflection continues, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. She contemplates the idea of giving up, the thoughts circling in her mind like a predator hunting its prey. The prospect of walking away from everything she has fought for, everything she has lost, weighs heavily on her heart. She closes her eyes, trying to block out the pain, But the darkness only intensifies her fear. She opens them again, feeling the coldness of the floor beneath her. As she stares at the puddle forming from her tears, a small flicker of something begins to stir within her, a faint whisper of resilience, a quiet refusal to surrender, even in her darkest hour. Nora sits at her desk, her eyes scanning a series of documents spread before her. She feels a nagging sense that something is missing, something she has overlooked. As she flips through the papers, her mind flashes back to seemingly insignificant moments from the past. She recalls a brief conversation with Jackson, where he hesitated just slightly before answering her question. At the time, she dismissed it as unimportant, but now it seems crucial. Another memory surfaces, a moment when Grace had mentioned a minor detail about Brandon's business dealings that Nora had brushed off as irrelevant. These fleeting memories begin to connect, forming a clearer picture in her mind. Her thoughts race as she pieces together each fragment of information. Nora remembers the way Brandon would always keep his watch exposed, a subtle signal of power but also a distraction. It was during these moments that he would steer conversations away from topics he didn't want discussed. She recalls a glance between Grace and Jackson during a meeting, a brief look that now speaks volumes. Her mind returns to a time when Brandon had been overly generous, offering help that seemed too good to be true. Each memory brings with it a new understanding, a realization that these were not random events, but deliberate moves in a larger game. As Nora continues to reflect, she realizes that these subtle hints, scattered throughout their interactions, were Brandon's way of manipulating everyone around him. The weight of her new understanding settles heavily on her shoulders, but there is also a glimmer of hope. She knows now what she must do. Her resolve strengthens as the pieces of the puzzle finally start to align. She feels a surge of determination. With this newfound clarity, Nora is ready to confront Brandon, armed not just with knowledge, but with the power of understanding. Nora's world begins to crumble as she faces one setback after another. The pressure mounts as each avenue she once believed would lead to a solution closes off. Brandon, more cunning than she had anticipated, maneuvers skillfully, blocking every move she tries to make. Her allies, one by one, begin to distance themselves, not out of disloyalty, but out of fear of being dragged into her spiraling downfall. Grace, who once stood by her side, now hesitates, her faith in Nora's plan wavering. Jackson, whose support had been a lifeline, is now unreachable, consumed by his own battles. Nora finds herself standing alone, isolated and vulnerable, with the walls closing in. Each day brings a new disaster. Financial resources dwindle rapidly, legal troubles intensify, and the media begins to circle, sensing the scent of blood. The pressure becomes unbearable, and Nora feels as if she is suffocating under the weight of it all. The memories of her past decisions haunt her, filling her with regret and self-doubt. She questions every choice she has made, wondering if she could have done things differently, if she could have avoided this catastrophic end. The sense of hopelessness grows stronger, and she starts to believe that there is no way out of the maze she is trapped in. As the situation becomes dire, Nora experiences a moment of pure desperation. Everything she had worked so hard to protect is slipping through her fingers, and the fear of total collapse grips her heart. The once strong and determined woman now feels like a shadow of her former self. However, amidst the chaos, a tiny flicker of resilience remains. Though it feels impossible, Nora knows that she must find the strength to face Brandon one last time, to challenge him with everything she has left. It is this faint hope, this final push against the overwhelming tide, that will either lead to her salvation or her ultimate defeat. Nora stands at the entrance of her new community center, surrounded by a diverse group of people from all walks of life. Her face radiates with a mix of pride and relief. The center, a beautiful building that now symbolizes hope and renewal, is a stark contrast to the rundown facility it once was. Nora's journey has been long and arduous, filled with moments of doubt and despair. But standing here today, she feels an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. She takes a deep breath, feeling the cool morning breeze on her face, and looks at the crowd with a renewed sense of purpose. As the ceremony unfolds, Nora shares her story, recounting the struggles and challenges she faced. Her voice is steady, filled with emotion as she talks about the moments that nearly broke her and the people who lifted her up when she was at her lowest. Among the audience, she sees familiar faces, those who had been with her through thick and thin. Grace Williams, her loyal friend and confidant, smiles encouragingly from the front row, her eyes gleaming with pride. Jackson Green, whose unwavering support helped keep Nora grounded, gives her a thumbs up, his rugged features softened by a warm smile. Then a surprising figure emerges from the crowd, Brandon Miller. Once her greatest adversary, he now looks on with an expression of humility and respect. He steps forward, his once confident demeanor now replaced by a sense of genuine remorse. He approaches Nora and extends a hand, his eyes sincere. Nora hesitates for a moment, memories of their past conflicts flashing before her eyes. But then she grasps his hand, a symbolic gesture of forgiveness and a new beginning. The crowd erupts in applause, the atmosphere thick with emotion and hope for a brighter future. The ribbon-cutting ceremony commences, and Nora, with a steady hand and a heart full of gratitude, cuts the ribbon to officially open the center. The crowd cheers, and for a moment, time seems to stand still. She takes a moment to savor this victory, not just for herself, but for everyone who believed in her vision. The center is more than just a building. It's a testament to resilience, a symbol of what can be achieved when a community comes together for a common purpose. As the event draws to a close, Nora walks through the center, now bustling with life. She watches children laughing, elders engaging in animated conversations, and families bonding. She feels a deep sense of fulfillment. The center is already serving its purpose, becoming a beacon of hope and unity in a community that had once been divided. Nora knows this is just the beginning. Her journey taught her the importance of perseverance, empathy, and the power of forgiveness. She looks ahead, ready to embrace whatever the future holds, with the unwavering belief that anything is possible when people stand together.
This story really touched my heart. It's a beautiful reminder of how much we can achieve when we keep pushing forward together. How did you feel about this journey? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories, and click the video on your screen to dive into another unforgettable tale. Can't wait to see you there.